The haunted prison. The Hollowstone Penitentiary had stood for over a century on the outskirts of Blackwood, a town already infamous for its dark history. The prison, with its towering stone walls and rusted iron gates, loomed like a grim monument to the horrors of justice gone wrong. Closed for decades, it was now a crumbling relic, left to rot amidst rumors of hauntings and inexplicable disappearances. As a freelance journalist with a taste for the macabre, I couldn't resist the call of Hollowstone. A local legend claimed that the prison was haunted by the restless spirits of its inmates, many of whom had suffered brutal deaths within its confines. Stories of ghostly whispers, shadowy figures, and screams echoing through the empty corridors had drawn paranormal investigators, urban explorers, and thrill seekers for years. Few stayed long, and fewer spoke of what they experienced. It was late autumn when I arrived in Blackwood, the air sharp with a bite of approaching winter. The locals were less than welcoming, their expressions darkening at the mention of Hollowstone. At the diner, a grizzled old man named Walter leaned in close as I questioned him about the prison. "You don't want to go there," he warned, his voice a raspy whisper. "That place, it's cursed. The things that happened there, the things that still happen." He trailed off, shaking his head. Despite his warning, or perhaps because of it, my resolve only hardened. Armed with a flashlight, a digital recorder, and a camera, I set out for Hollowstone that evening. The path to the prison was overgrown, the asphalt cracked and choked with weeds. The trees lining the road seemed to close in, their skeletal branches clawing at the darkening sky. By the time the prison came into view, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the world bathed in an eerie twilight. The gates groaned as I pushed them open, the sound echoing like a warning. The courtyard beyond was littered with debris, rusted shackles, broken glass, and scraps of paper yellowed with age. The main building rose before me, its facade pitted and scarred, the windows shattered like empty eyes staring into the void. I stepped inside, the air heavy with the scent of mildew and decay. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the grimy floor. I turned on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom to reveal rows of empty cells. The iron bars were streaked with rust, and the walls were etched with graffiti, some of it crude, some of it chillingly desperate. As I ventured deeper, the temperature seemed to drop, and an unnatural stillness settled over the place. My flashlight flickered, and I cursed under my breath, smacking it until the beam steadied. I reached the central block, where the cells radiated like spokes from a circular guard tower. It was here, according to the legends, that the most violent and disturbed inmates were kept. The stories spoke of suicides, murders, and even disappearances, as though the prison itself had consumed its inhabitants. I set up my equipment in the guard tower, the high vantage point offering a view of the entire block. As the recorder hummed to life, I began asking questions. "Is anyone here?" My voice echoed back at me, swallowed by the vast emptiness. "Can you show yourself?" Nothing. Just silence. Frustrated but undeterred, I decided to explore further. I ventured into the solitary confinement wing, where the worst of the worst had been isolated. The air here was stifling, the walls covered in crude drawings and frantic scrawls, pleas for mercy, threats of vengeance, and strange symbols I didn't recognize. I entered one of the cells, my flashlight catching the faint outline of a figure etched into the wall, its eyes hollow and mouth twisted in a silent scream. A sudden chill raced down my spine, and I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening clang. I spun around, my heart pounding, but there was no one there. The room was empty. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice trembling. A low, guttural whisper answered, its source impossible to pinpoint. "Get out!" I fumbled with the door, my hands slick with sweat, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, overlapping until they became an incoherent chorus of anger and despair. Suddenly, the door flew open, and I stumbled out, gasping for air. The corridor was dark, my flashlight dimming again. I could hear footsteps behind me, heavy and deliberate, but when I turned, the hallway was empty. Panicking, I ran back to the central block, only to find my equipment scattered across the floor. The recorder was still running, its display blinking erratically. I picked it up, rewinding to hear what it had captured. The playback was filled with static, but beneath it, I could hear voices, whispers, and screams, overlapping in a cacophony of torment. One voice stood out, clear and malevolent. "You shouldn't have come." The guard tower was no longer a sanctuary. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision, and the air felt alive, pulsing with a malevolent energy. The footsteps returned, louder and closer, but no matter where I looked, I saw nothing. I grabbed my gear and bolted for the exit, my breath ragged and my heart racing. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, the walls closing in as though the prison itself was trying to trap me. When I finally burst into the courtyard, the night was deathly silent. The gate stood open, and I ran through it without looking back. I didn't stop until I reached my car, collapsing into the driver's seat. My hands shook as I started the engine, the headlights illuminating the road ahead. But as I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw them, figures standing in the prison yard, watching me. I returned to my motel, shaken but alive. The next morning, I reviewed the footage and audio. The video was distorted, the frames filled with static and shadowy shapes. The audio was worse, a relentless cacophony of screams, whispers, and that same malevolent voice. I left Blackwood that day, but Hollowstone never left me. I hear the whispers in my dreams, feel the cold chill of its corridors when I'm alone, and sometimes, in the dead of night, I see shadows moving in the corners of my room, hear footsteps echoing where there should be none. Hollowstone may have released me, but I know it's only a matter of time before it calls me back. And next time, I'm not sure I'll escape.